Look at this goofball. How could he ever be anything but a silly scoundrel? From his appearance alone, I think most of us drew the conclusion that he was mainly a comedic character with no real menacing attributes. But we were proven wrong. To figure out how Eggman went from goofball bad guy to fearsome supervillain, we're going to do something I think no one has ever done before. We're going to analyze Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Okay, so cutting through the thick layer of excellent Sonic 3 Knuckles analyses might be a difficult task, but I will try my best to give you a new perspective on how this experience managed to convince us that beneath this goofy exterior lies something worth fearing. During our first encounters with Eggman, we learned that he is a technological threat as opposed to a physical one. Without his machines, Eggman would not stand a chance against Sonic, unless of course it's in a race. He presents himself as a formidable adversary, but aside from taking on Sonic himself on occasion, there's nothing that makes us feel that he is a threat beyond our expectations. In Sonic 3 and Knuckles, this changes almost instantly. Let's take a look at the key factors of this encounter that convinces us that Eggman is in fact a supervillain far beyond what meets the eye. Number 1. No more David versus Goliath. In most action stories, the protagonist is up against something far more powerful than them. To reach their goal, the protagonist must prevail against incredible odds. These types of stories create suspense, and if it's done well, it's exciting to see how the protagonist manages to overcome these odds. If it were the other way around, a powerful protagonist defeating a more or less defenseless antagonist, the story would be, in most cases, an extraordinarily dull one. In the first encounters with Eggman, we have a standard David versus Goliath situation. Eggman has his city-sized base in Scrap Brain Zone and later a seemingly operational Death Egg from the get-go. Not to mention armies of drones scattered across the land. In Sonic 3 and Knuckles, this changes immediately. At the end of Sonic 2, Sonic defeats Eggman on board a Death Egg and the moon-sized base plummets towards the ground. While Sonic descends safely, the Death Egg crashes on Angel Island, an island floating in the sky. The weight of the Death Egg causes the island itself to plummet. As Angel Island crashes somewhere in the ocean, Sonic and Tails rush to investigate. At this point, the playing field has been almost completely leveled. Eggman arrived at Angel Island mere moments before Sonic. They are now both in a place they've most certainly never visited before. Eggman's base is in ruins since his defeat just moments earlier, and both of them presumably exhausted from their recent encounter. So, given the outcome where Eggman had the upper hand the entire time, this encounter should be a walk in the park, right? Nope. This is where Eggman reveals his true capacity. This time he's more desperate, which makes him more reckless and more ruthless. He also shows that he is in fact an intellectual threat as well. He knows that he will not be able to take on Sonic in his current state, so he needs a way to hinder Sonic's progress until he has had the chance to rebuild the Death Egg. He achieves this by convincing the Guardian of the Master Emerald, Knuckles, that Sonic is there to steal it. Let's examine what this signifies. We do not know exactly how long it took between Eggman crashing on Angel Island and Sonic arriving to investigate. But we can be sure that Eggman had to operate very quickly to be able to convince Knuckles that Sonic was coming to steal the Master Emerald before he arrived. This gives us two possible scenarios. 1. In this short window of time, Eggman was able to research the lore of the indigenous people to the point where he was able to come up with arguments convincing enough to persuade Knuckles to do everything in his might to hinder Sonic's progress. Or 2. Eggman already had a plan in place for this very specific scenario, which he executed upon crashing on Angel Island. Either way, it shows that Eggman has the ability to obtain and process data with extreme efficiency. Now, the effects of his more desperate approach becomes apparent immediately, as we are barely halfway through the first act of the first zone before he sets the entire jungle on fire. He then follows it up with a carpet bombing session. And all this takes place in the very first zone. This is brutality far beyond anything we have seen at any stage of previous encounters, which shows us that Eggman has no scruples when it comes to achieving his goals. Number 2. Everything is happening right now. The sense of urgency in Sonic 3 and Knuckles is astounding, and I believe that this can be attributed to the excellent storytelling. There are no information prompts, we are witnessing no dialogue, and there is nothing but in-game cutscenes. Everything is happening in real time. Most of the story unfolds in the background as Sonic progresses through the environment, which adds to the sense of urgency. Sonic doesn't have time to stop and look at what's happening. He has to move forward, assessing the situation as he goes. There is no time to waste. We will take a look at a few examples of how excellently this storytelling method is executed. Almost immediately upon arrival, we get to witness the ongoing invasion of Angel Island, taking place mostly in the background as Sonic is fighting his way through the badniks that has already been deployed. Towards the end, Sonic reaches the volcano in which the Death Egg crashed the second time. As he progresses through the caves, you see the Death Egg appearing closer and closer. I remember very vividly the first time I reached the culmination of this section. It was the first time I'd gotten through Sandopolis Act 2, I was down to my last life and my heart was racing. As Sonic reaches the top of the caves, Knuckles greets him with a giant emerald to the face, sending him flying back down towards the lava floods down below. He lands right under the Death Egg, its eyes flashes, melting away his foothold. Eggman appears in a distance, firing his rockets. Sonic is now running for his life, and it was awesome. Anyway, as Sonic reaches Sky Sanctuary, we see the Death Egg rising up through the clouds, releasing an army of badniks in the process. At this point, Sonic has caught up with Eggman. The enemies he finds here are the very ones we see released from the Death Egg, which we see arriving in real time. We even get to witness forest critters that has not yet been encapsulated. Not only does this excellently illustrate how close Sonic is to reaching Eggman for the final showdown, it also shows how efficiently Eggman conquers new territory. As opposed to the jungle section, where Sonic did in fact arrive moments after Eggman, this time we can be sure that we're witnessing the conquest from the very start. Number 3. Unbreakable. You know those punching bags that you can knock down as many times as you'd like and they keep bouncing back? That's Eggman during this encounter. Including Sonic 2, which takes place right before the events of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Eggman suffers major defeats back to back. And yet somehow, he's still one step ahead every time. Through wits and unfathomable tenacity, he manages to turn every defeat into new opportunities, which he takes full advantage of. It's like he has every conceivable outcome mapped out, and without missing a beat, executes whatever needs to be done to succeed. Let's go through each defeat and see how he manages to bounce back. At the end of the events of Sonic 2, Eggman is defeated aboard the Death Egg, causing it to plummet towards the ground. And it happens to land on Angel Island. Eggman immediately starts to rebuild the Death Egg, but he knows that his badniks alone will not be able to delay Sonic for long enough. So he manages to convince Knuckles that Sonic has come to steal the Master Emerald, which leads Knuckles to hinder Sonic's progress. Regardless, Sonic catches up just as the Death Egg launches. Once aboard, he defeats Eggman, once again causing the Death Egg to plummet back towards the island. It now lands right in the center of the island's volcano, which just so happens to house the Master Emerald. Not having time to rebuild the Death Egg once more, Eggman figures out that he can use the Master Emerald to power the Death Egg, allowing it to once again take to the skies. Eggman is successful in stealing the Master Emerald and manages to relaunch the Death Egg yet again. With the help of Knuckles, Sonic manages to once again catch up with him just in time. After fighting his way through the moon-sized construction, he manages to defeat Eggman yet again. But guess what? Eggman manages to escape with the Master Emerald, an object of immense power. In order to truly defeat Eggman, Sonic has to gather all the Chaos Emeralds and the Super Emeralds to be able to turn into Hypersonic, in order for him to be able to follow Eggman into space where the true final showdown takes place. Not until Eggman's beloved Death Egg robot is in shambles and the Master Emerald returned to its rightful place is he truly defeated. Or is he? Apparently, Eggman's defeat triggers some sort of backup protocol, causing the Egg Robos, presumably led by Mecha Sonic, to once again steal the Master Emerald. It's now up to Knuckles to retrieve it. In the events of Sonic 3 Knuckles, we get to witness Eggman in his prime, and it's probably a lot more menacing than expected. We get to see what he is truly capable of, and that he will stop at nothing to achieve his goals. Eggman's persistence, tenacity, recklessness, ruthlessness, and unquestionable genius makes it very hard to see him as anything but a villain worth fearing.